come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another special episode of Geeky Gentlemen. On the final week of Horror Month here on Geeky Gentlemen, we are pumping out as many of these episodes as we possibly can, no matter how short they might be. That's a tease for possibly another episode you can get. So this week we are joined by Squatch Gang, who is a contestant on Who Reviews the Reviewers, and who unfortunately was voted off. Squatch, you are welcome to join my crusade against Captain Logan and the other judges.
Well,
death to the judges and all that stuff. It's Horror Month. We're allowed to say anything, and people can just assume it's farce. That's my legal protection. So anyway, no, Squatch, I thought your stuff was great in the contest, and everyone, you should go check out his channel and subscribe, because this guy's going places. I promise. Alex was my pick last season, and look where he is. So, get on the Squatch Gang boat early and often, everybody. Anything you want to say, or you want to just keep listening to me, talk you up?
I really do like it when people stroke my ego.
Not a problem, but we won't talk about it like that, because I'm honestly, Steve, considering renaming this from Horror Month to Never Have Sex Again Month, because I don't know what it is. The only one movie. The Omen's the only vague one, and even then, the whole child thing it's so. Oh my god, it's everywhere this month, and I don't know why.
The phallic symbolism in this movie is just all over the place. I mean, I like it, but it's exactly like It Follows: Never Have Sex Again.
Yeah, between that and Hellraiser and oh my god, it's craziness. This is Sexual Horror Month on Geeky Gentlemen, apparently.
Yeah, and I mean, last year we did The Fly. Maybe we should have gone back and revisited that movie here.
Yeah, that's what we need to see. I actually watched the original Fly again at Bill's, or for the first time at Bill's request.
Cool.
Yeah, it's not as good as the remake.
It's okay, but the 80s Fly is a lot better.
Yeah, I was expecting it to be terrible. It wasn't. But anyway, there's our mini review of The Fly.
You can attribute the same thing to Invasion of the Body Snatchers, by the way.
Okay. So Squatch joined us, as WRCR contestants are always invited to do. He's joined us, and he got to pick what we were going to discuss, and he wanted to get in during Horror Month, which, I mean, I could tell from his reviews that horror is kind of his thing. So Squatch, what made you decide to pick Alien?
Okay, well, Alien is a movie that I watched when I was way too young to be watching it, probably, and it horrified me for my, entire childhood. And as I got older, it's a movie that's, I have just grown to love it because of how intriguing the horror is in this movie. And it's just super fascinating, and it's smart horror. And it's just become a huge, fan fave it's just one of my favorite movies. And so I thought, any opportunity I get to talk about this movie is a opportunity that I will take.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll throw down the gloves kind of early. I don't really care for Alien.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. This is, I think, the third time I've watched this movie, and I've just gotten to the point where, I really don't care for this movie. I don't know if maybe it's been talked up too much for me, or maybe I just got to it too late in my career of watching horror movies, or maybe just that I feel like better things have been done with the franchise since the first movie, though admittedly not much, but I think Alien is an important franchise, and I think it's the more artistically and culturally important franchise, but, man, I'm so much more a Predator guy. way above and beyond. I'm much more into Predator than I am into Alien, and like it's hard to like one without the other because those two franchises are so connected outside of the films and even in the films at this point. But
we don't speak of those films.
Oh, but I made a review of it. I made a review of AVPR.
I can't believe you got through that movie again.
It's Star Trek movies, and then AVPR, and then, I don't know, the Star Wars prequels, and there's probably a couple other things we can throw on that list. But yeah, so like, you know, it's so hard to get away from one without the other. But yeah, I'm much more into Predator than I am into Aliens, and just Alien, I think it's good. I think it's certainly enjoyable for some people. It's really not my thing. How about you, Steve? What are your general quick thoughts on Alien before we get into this too much more?
Well, I really like it. I think this is one of the best horror movies ever made. I think it's one of the best films ever made. And I can understand why you don't like it. Ridley Scott is just one of those directors where he's got a very particular sensibility. He's got a very particular agenda. So when he makes a good movie, which hasn't been too much recently, although The Martian was amazing, but he hasn't made a good movie in a while, aside from that. But when he finally sits down and decides he's going to do something that's based on true, genuine inspiration and not just random cash cows or, hey, I really want to shoot this one particular scene, so sit through 90 minutes of filler until we get there, he tends to go overboard. And it's always a good kind of overboard, where every little piece of the set matters, every lighting choice matters, every aspect of the delivery matters, and I think that's partly why Alien works for me so well. It's a lot like the first Terminator movie, where it's very different than what the franchise would ultimately become, but what it's doing and the ideas there and the way it's layered, I think are just so fascinating that I almost don't want to put it in the league with the rest of the films. I like Aliens a lot, but Alien is just a different thing. Terminator 2 is a really good movie, but Terminator is a different thing. The themes of the phallic symbols and sexualization and feminism and all that stuff are so interestingly interconnected here, and I feel like we lose a lot of that going forward. So I always have like a tremendous respect for this movie.
I disagree completely. I think it only gets expanded on as the films go on until you get to... Like, Alien 3 is barely passable, but I think that has the most of it, and then Alien 4 is God knows what the hell they were doing. I still can't believe Joss Whedon wrote that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joss Whedon wrote that movie, but he only wrote, like, a treatment that got changed completely by the end of the movie.
Okay, that's fair then.
Yeah, it's not his movie at all. He didn't want his name on it.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, he should have pulled an Alan Moore and demand they take his name off of it then. And to be fair, it's been a long time since I've seen any of them, but like I always remembered not really caring for the first one. It is so slow. I almost fell asleep watching it last night. Which I think the only reason I didn't, and maybe he did this on purpose, is because the spaceship gets really loud at points. Like otherwise, I was nodding off during this one. I've just never really cared for the first Alien film.
It's kind of like Blade Runner in that regard, where I still think that's a great, great film, but if someone tells me they're bored, I can understand it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Blade Runner and Alien aren't the most phenomenologically stimulating movies out there. Very little happens in any particular scene. It always takes a lot of time to get to the point. But I always appreciate the craft of getting there so much. Like this movie and Blade Runner both have scenes where we're just kind of waiting for something to happen. We're going through a process like where someone's asking a bunch of questions or just sitting around an office trying to figure out what's going on, and we sit on that scene for like a good 2 to 3 minutes. And that's certainly boring, but the way the whole scene's constructed always fascinates me.
Gotcha. And see, that's the thing for me, is it is so long till anything really starts to happen in this movie, I feel like. And everything's, like, you know, it's going to sound like I'm throwing down gloves for real, but the only thing I can think of to compare it to pacing-wise is the first Star Trek movie. And, like, certainly that has it in spades a lot worse, but that's the only movie I can compare it to, and it doesn't help that they came out the same year.
Oh, did they? I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah, 79 and 79.
Okay.
The trick is you got to remember Star Trek went off the air in 69 and came back 10 years later for the first film.
Okay, yeah. I've only seen the movie once. I couldn't get through it completely.
Yeah. Nostalgia Critic did a review of that movie, and like there's that scene where they're doing the pass of the Enterprise. It's like 4 more minutes, and he just hits fast forward. And that seems like that's a much better way to watch that movie. Is just fast forward through certain bits. Anyway, so yeah, Alien though, most of what I'm gonna have to say is, and I'm completely willing to argue about all of this. It's good. Objectively, it's good, but it is slow and it bores the crap out of me from time to time. And when it's not doing that, it's unfortunate that it's as important as it is because it's influenced so much that other things have done this better, and I've seen it so much that now it just bores me. Even the parts that are good and contributing to the culture of horror, if you will, have now just gotten to the point where they bore me because I've seen them too much. So that's my overall opinion of Alien. And here comes the machete aimed at my head.
Well, I guess it's totally understandable where you're coming from. Alien is definitely a slow movie almost in the exact same way that Blade Runner is. But the thing that, okay, if you just look at the title of Alien, I feel like that is literally the most perfect title for any movie in the history of just film. Alien describes every single aspect of this movie, whether it comes to the way the characters are introduced, to the pacing, to the creature itself. Literally everything about this movie is Alien. And, like, from the beginning, I think, for me, slow movies, if the slow movie is slow with intention, then I am totally willing to sit through it. And I feel like the reason this movie starts off so slow and is quite slow for the most part throughout the entire film is because it's setting a sort of tone and kind of vibe that kind of makes you feel uneasy throughout the entire movie because you have no idea what is going to happen going into this. The trailers are very vague, unless you've had things spoiled for you, like through just like pop culture references and stuff.
Yeah, and that's another problem is I have.
Yeah. But
I think I got to this movie too late. It helps that you watched it when you were a kid.
Yeah, and that's like a big thing. That's why I have such an appreciation for it, is because it frightened me so much as a little kid. And so I was like, the older I got, I was like, I want to understand why this scares me so much. I want to understand. And through that, I've watched this movie countless times. And it's so interesting just the way they choose to do things, like how they introduce the characters. From the beginning, you don't know who the main character is in this movie at all. And it's not till the end where Ripley's like the last one alive, where you could argue that she wasn't even necessarily the main character up until the point where she's the last person alive.
I can maybe see that argument, but I don't know. We get a number of scenes with Ripley as kind of the investigator.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't know if I can fully agree with that, but I can see where that might come, where that perception would come from.
I mean, she's not any more fleshed out than anyone else until we get to the very, very end, though.
Yeah, and we open up with Kane getting out of his cryopod, and that's such a here's your main character moment. It opens up, the first guy wakes up and he gets out, and we focus on him like waking up, and he's all groggy and stuff, and then we follow him on his exploration into the space jockey ship, and it's like, I guess I'm assuming this is the main character. He's in on the exploration of LV-426. He's right there. He's causing a lot of the action, plot-wise, to move forward. And then the facehugger gets on his face, and you're like, oh god. And you have no idea what's happening at that point. And once you realize ultimately that he's the first one dead, it's like, oh my god, I have literally no idea what is going to happen. I have no idea what this movie is doing. And for me as a kid, that was absolutely horrifying. I have a thing where it's like, in movies constantly, where I feel like it introduces someone as the main character. If that person I feel like they introduced as the main character dies, it freaks me out for some reason. Like if you've ever seen the Blob remake, the same thing happens in that. There's a guy you think is the main character, and then he gets killed, and you're like, what the heck? And it's like, oh god, I have no idea what's happening right now. And I get, that's obviously one of the most iconic scenes probably in cinematic history is the chest burster scene.
And there's the anecdote about them not telling the actors it was going to happen and stuff. And Monkey and Apple, that YouTube channel?
No, I've actually never heard of that.
He's the guy that got really famous for being like the first one to make fun of Bale's Batman voice with that Joker Batman interview thing.
Okay.
He does occasionally these behind the scenes where he'll like act out all these different parts of like, behind the scenes on famous movies. And and there's one where it's the guy that played Dallas talking about that whole thing where Ridley Scott didn't tell anybody that the chest burster was going to happen. And he goes, no, that's just the normal behavior on the set. Ridley Scott is a terrible director. He doesn't care about your performance at all. He's just a negligent human being. And so I legitimately thought that something was coming out of John Hurt's chest in the middle of that scene. I didn't realize that this was some kind of trick until like days later.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so like it's really funny to hear about that because Ridley Scott just apparently will use everything. He's like Steve mentioned The Martian. I heard an interview with David Glover, who's in that briefly, and there's that scene in The Martian where like he gets up and like falls down on the ground, and that legitimately happened on set. And Ridley Scott apparently just leaves like 10 cameras rolling at the same time, and they used that take where David Glover just fell and busted his ass because of something on the floor, and they legitimately used that take since he got up and kept going. And so yeah, that's just kind of the director Ridley Scott is he seems more interested in the stuff going on behind the camera than the stuff going on in front of it, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, and I mean that's partly why I enjoy watching this movie. I guess that's partly why I don't get bored. Is just even if in places where the actors clearly don't really know what they're doing, it's always shot in a really interesting angle. When we first get the facehugger, we don't expect it. It's a really well directed kind of jump scare. And when the alien pops out of his chest, not only most of those reactions are authentic, as we know, but not only that, just the way they constructed that thing in the first place and how it was made to pop out, and the whole production process of that is fascinating.
Yeah, I think the chest burster looks really good, but since this is kind of a good bridge to get to the effects, I think a lot of the effects in this movie are really dated. The number one in particular I'm going to point to is what's his name?
Ash.
The android.
Ash.
Yeah, Ash. When his head is off, it looks terrible.
Okay, I totally agree with you. That is, if I have a complaint, is that certain scenes are edited and directed in a super weird way that almost shows off how dated some of the effects look. The thing that's weird about that scene, if I'm remembering it like correctly, we have a still shot of his head while they're placing it on the table, and then there's a cut, and the camera doesn't move. It's a cut to now him with the real actor's head there.
Yeah, I mean, it almost looks like a jump cut.
Yeah, it's like a jump cut. It's like they don't cut away. If I'm remembering it correctly, now I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that it just cuts and then boom, the actor's there.
Like Ripley's hand kind of comes in front of the camera for a second.
Yeah.
That's what they use to cover up the cut. But I mean, like that's something you do if you're showing off how good your animatronic is, and it is not that good.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
That head looks terrible.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then, like, the other thing is the alien, like, they pretty much just had the actor put on the head mask and then run around set, and that's why so much of the movie is as dark as it is, because it's kind of like the whole Jaws thing, where the costume wasn't good enough for them to be able to afford to show it very often, and every time you see it, it's always kind of obscured by something's blocking at least part of it, and it's always dark no matter what. And so the alien never looks very good in the first movie. I mean, the head looks fine, but everything else is pretty downhill to where it really does just look like a suit.
For me, that kind of works, though. The reason being, like, the alien, the xenomorph, if we want to call it that, it wasn't officially kind of labeled that till Aliens, I guess. But if we talk about, like, kind of one of the things about the alien is that it takes on kind of the characteristics of its host, and and it's supposed to be very like humanoid-like, and that's kind of what makes it so creepy. It's almost like when it's there, it's like, you know, with the phallic imagery, it's almost like, oh god, this is like a rape in a way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the joke that I think Crack did, is it rapes its way into you, then it rapes its way out of you, then it goes and rapes your friends to death. And really that's the brilliance of it, but I'm not talking about the fact that it looks humanoid. I mean that it, like, the way the skin looks, like, it physically, you can tell it's a costume. Like the way it's shot, it, like the biology, it doesn't look like skin anymore. It looks like a costume to me. It looks like, you know, leather, or pleather or plastic just kind of stuck onto the actor. I don't have a problem with it looking humanoid. I like that side of things. I just think that they obviously couldn't afford to do exactly what they wanted with it, and that's why it looks so dark all the time. And so you do get kind of the Jaws thing. The suspense in this movie with the alien is pretty good, particularly the scene in the air vent. But still, like, I think some of the effects in this are either dated or just kind of bad. I mean, the go-to, if you want to talk about dated effects, is, of course, Mother. Because, God, that computer is so old. It's like super advanced technology. They just really have a thing for 70s computers, so they made it look like that. And it's funny because I just finished playing Predator Concrete Jungle for Horror Month, and Mother is in that. They give the origin of Mother, and it's actually a human being plugged into a computer and stuff, so it's unfortunate that I saw that first. Saw that again first. You know what I meant. No, but, like, some of the effects are dated, and that's not the movie's fault. I'm sure it's the best it could have been given the time and the budget, but that clearly is something that keeps it from, I think, being immortal, is it doesn't look as good now as it did then. And there are horror movies where you can point to where it looks just as good now as it did then, even though they are using, like, you know, like crazy monsters and stuff. So I think that is one significant problem with the film in retrospect, and maybe even at the time, because I can't imagine audiences actually bought Ash's head back then. Like, that's the part, like, Steve, wasn't it you I was talking to about, like, Data recently, and, like, how some of the prosthetics look nothing like Data actually did?
So. Yeah,
like, there's that one episode where Riker pulls off his arm, and it's clearly just a mannequin arm, and I get very much the same thing with that. I'm like, yeah, that's not really his arm. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have that problem all over the place. Because there are certain episodes that look fantastic, and other ones that look awful.
Yeah, and so I got kind of the same takeaway from that. I'm like, yeah, story may be good, but the effects really, really could use... Like, this is the kind of stuff you go back and you add CGI to. You can CGI Mother's computer screens to look more advanced and stuff like that. Just have a voice actress do it. I don't know.
I really like the old-fashioned, you know, retro computers, and that's actually a problem I have with, you know, Prometheus, is, like, I wish that movie looked more like this movie in terms of, like, the computers and the electronics and such.
It is a weird inconsistency, and it's a problem I have a lot with, like, Doctor Who. Because, like, there's an episode of Tom Baker's run on Doctor Who where he goes to the future of Earth, and there's, like, a space station that human beings were hibernating on, and it's supposed to be the most advanced piece of technology that human beings have ever made, and yet the computers are like the old reel tape things in the background. And so it's just like, wow, that looks really bad. And that you got modern Doctor Who now, where, like, every advanced piece of, like, even the computers that people have in the quote-unquote modern day are, like, you know, holographic displays and touch screens and stuff, similar to the stuff like Tony Stark's using in Avengers and all that stuff. So it's just like, it looks like it's a really weird inconsistency, and I don't know how you really solve it, because going back and having them use the old technology certainly doesn't seem like the answer to me. So, like, you know, things like RoboCop are allowed to get away with that because it's set in an alternate version of the 1980s. But things like this, where it's supposed to be, you know, decade or centuries into the future, it really does feel out of place. So I don't know. I guess that's just a general problem with all of science fiction on film, though.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that either just bothers you or doesn't. For me, that adds to the aesthetic of the movie. And I don't
know, Steve. Where do you land on it? I guess.
Kind of tough. Because it's definitely not a great effect, and it's worse the more you see it. But Rask, I see what you're saying, too, of it adding to the aesthetic. Because like you said, the movie is all about the concept of being an alien. And so I think in that way it works almost a little bit better now, because you're seeing things that, let's pretend you're like 15 years old and you're watching Alien, and you don't know computers used to look like that. Yeah. It kind of adds a little bit of an air of mystery. And yeah, that was something that bothered me about Prometheus, is that it didn't look anything like this movie, and it was supposedly a prequel.
And
yeah,
how I can kind of reconcile that with myself is that, and this is another thing that is always talked about with this film, is it's like they're truckers in space. Like,
so they get like the crappiest equipment ever.
Yeah, and their spaceship is not pretty.
They get retrofitted with computers from 200 years ago.
Yeah, they're just that cheap.
I don't know. That might be a better example than anything else I've ever heard of. It's just like the company is just that cheap, and working for a cheap company, I can certainly understand that. I mean, I'm using equipment from the 1990s, and I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to use, and I'm complaining about it. So these guys really have something to complain about. They're still using DOS in 2037,
and they're in space.
Yeah, that's a good argument. I like that. It's a little like cheap. It's a bit of a jab at the movie, but it's better than anything else I can think of, so I'll take it. I don't know, Steve, you take us somewhere, because I'm about out of things to talk about with the effects and the datedness of them.
Oh, okay, cool. There's a lot to go with on this movie. There's a couple things I want to mention right off that. We talked a little bit about this before recording, but I'm always a sucker for horror movie music, and I love the music in this movie, and it's done by the guy who did The Omen, Gary Goldsmith, which is interesting. Because we mentioned last time when we did the Omen video, the other projects he did, and I'm not sure if I mentioned Alien at that point, but rewatching it just earlier today, I had no idea that it was the same guy. You can kind of hear it in some of the beats.
See, I don't know, the score didn't really stick out to me on this one. I thought it was kind of generic horror movie score. It didn't, it had its, creeping, and it had some, shock beats and stuff like that, but it didn't stand out to me as much as The Omen did.
Well, it's not as good as The Omen soundtrack-wise, but I still think it is definitely really good, and it's really fitting. It's a lot like the rest of this movie, where some of it's just so understated, and the way it functions in the film is really just to add to that atmosphere.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I could agree with that. I just thought it was passable. It wasn't a problem, and it wasn't bad or anything. I just thought it was, a passable score. It didn't jump out at me.
That's fair. Part of the reason I like it so much is that there's just this consistent surrealist vibe through the whole film. Like, you take any given frame of the film, and you print it out as just a picture, and it's got like this 70s, 80s surrealist art and movement kind of framework to it, and the music really helps in that, particularly when you get to some of the slower scenes, and it's the film acknowledging that you're supposed to sit through some of this, and the kind of antsiness you get, it helps even more when something happens.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to 2001 in that way, where it's you can go back and you can cut out some of those long, just, scenes where maybe necessarily not a lot of plot is happening, but if you take away some of those scenes, you kind of lose the experience of the movie.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, 2001 I consider more of something that's I love that movie, don't get me wrong, but I consider that movie more homework than enjoyment. If you're gonna watch that movie, you're doing it for the sake of watching the movie. It's like going to a museum specifically to look at a painting. You're not doing it, for the leisure of it. You're doing it because you want to experience it again. And I don't think I'd put this movie quite up on that same level, but I do get the point of how dragged out some of it is, for lack of a better term. is intentional.
I think this
It
kind of
just
goes
doesn't
to your
work
point,
for me.
though, of there's always a problem when a film or any kind of work of art gets instituted into the canon. So if you didn't experience it when it first came out, it suddenly changes the whole perception of it, whether you want to do that or not.
Yeah.
Like 2001: A Space Odyssey, I'm sorry, I was not born in the 60s. I can't experience that as just a movie. I can only watch it with everyone in the world yelling in my ear that it's one of the greatest films ever made. And I agree, it's a really, really good movie. But it's hard for me to even generate like a genuine experience. I watch it and it's like you said, it's like homework. It's like Shakespeare, where yeah, this is really cool and I'm really enjoying it, but it's because I know I'm supposed to enjoy it on a certain level.
Yeah.
I was
Go ahead, Spot.
Oh, I have a weird experience with 2001 where it's like the first review I ever saw on that movie was a Confused Matthew review where he just rips that movie apart. And then I saw that movie after like having this background knowledge of being like, oh, I guess there are people that think this movie's really bad. And I didn't have the baggage of like, oh, everyone's saying, oh, it's one of the greatest films ever made. And so when I watched that movie, I was like, wow, this is very interesting, and I actually really liked it. And it was more after that I kind of got the whole, like, everyone's like, oh, this movie is fantastic. And so I kind of had a weird experience with it in that way, whereas, like, I didn't actually have all the baggage of everyone saying that it was such a great movie.
Okay.
That's very helpful. You're very lucky.
And the same thing goes to this movie, Alien. Same exact kind of experience, in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I kind of had that with Alien, where I watched it first after hearing a couple people rip on it when I was in middle school, I think. So watching it, just assuming that it might be bad because when you're 15, you're a follower, really. That's all you can really be. So when I went and watched it, I'm like, no, I think something's wrong with them or something's wrong with me because I really like this. And then it's only after that I started researching into it.
Yeah, like, see, I enjoyed this the first time I watched it, but it's just not something I can really go back to and enjoy, because every time, like, even the first time I watched it, I was still just, like, kind of nodding off, really bored, and it didn't help that I'd seen Predator first.
Yeah, that might be part of it. Let me ask you this, though, just out of curiosity, even though it's a movie that you don't really like and not something you go back to, would you say, like, a year from now you could still remember this movie really well? And that don't mean the same thing as being a memorable movie, but just in the idea of,
like, could I remember all the scenes and stuff?
Yeah, like, is this movie something that still plays pretty freshly in your mind?
I'm gonna say no, because I didn't, like, I remember, like, as certain things were about to happen and go, okay, here's a really good scene, but so much of the plot I just completely forgot.
Okay.
Like, I could not remember exactly. Like, when they get called away to the planet, I'm like, oh yeah, Mother did it on purpose. And then when they get there, I'm like, okay, now the face hugger is going to happen, and then he's going to, like, be in the hospital wing for a day or two, and then he's going to be okay, and then the alien's going to escape, and it's going to pick him off one by one. So, like, I remember the general outline of the plot, but I couldn't remember any of the characters' names, though, to be fair, that's my personal thing. I'm terrible at that. So no, like, a lot of this doesn't stick with me. I couldn't remember what people look like. I couldn't remember a lot of the set design. I again question, though, why the hell there's a room with chains that's just leaking water. That seems like a really dangerous waste of resources on a spaceship.
Okay, I only ask because I've only seen this movie 3 times. I saw it when I was 15, I saw it when Prometheus came out, and I saw it for this review. But I didn't have a change in experience. I felt like I could come back and do this review with you guys without having watched it today. And it's been like 3 years since I've seen it if I didn't watch it this morning.
And I did come back to do this review after not having watched it today.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. It's one of those movies where even if I didn't like it, I feel like it'd be really hard for me to forget about it. It's like, I'm going to compare it to a bad movie, just to illustrate the point better. It's like the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes. Those movies are really, really awful. They're nearly unwatchable, but I still remember them in great detail.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
It's odd. I don't know how to explain that.
I think the thing with this movie is that you may not remember it so much plot-wise, because how I see it, this movie is not necessarily so much about a really dense plot as much it's more observatory. Like even the dialogue in this movie where you have scenes where characters are like discussing over the dinner table and they're just talking with each other. A lot of times you don't even know what they're saying. They're just like chatting and you have no idea what's actually being said necessarily unless you single in on one particular conversation that's going on between them. In particular, the facehugger scene. It's very observatory. You're just kind of there to watch it all happen in a way where it does have some very movie-esque scenes where it's like, oh, this is exposition and something like that. But a lot of scenes just kind of played like, oh, you're just here to watch and be excited when something crazy happens.
Yeah, this movie isn't designed to make you connect with any person. It's creating a very intentional barrier and between the audience and the film itself. And I think that's partly why some of the stuff with the phallic symbols and the sexual identity themes and stuff like that works so well. Because it's trying to give you an air of objectivity in that way. You're not necessarily 100% rooting for anyone, and you're just watching an alien experience and then reconciling it with your own experience is not necessarily what the movie's telling you.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and use that transition to the sexual imagery here, because you mentioned earlier that you thought this one capitalizes on that much more than any of the other films, and I think Aliens does it the best. They really kind of hammer it home with Alien 3, and then Alien 4 we just don't talk about. That's a list that can grow very, very quickly. So, like, I feel like the sexual imagery is introduced, and it's certainly intentional here, but I don't think they quite knew exactly where they were going with all of it. And I think it's picked up on and expanded upon much, much more in Aliens.
Well, so how familiar are you guys with H.R. Geiger or Giger, however you want to pronounce it? Everyone seems to pronounce it differently. But H.R. Geiger, the surrealist artist who came up with like the design for the alien and the derelict spaceship and everything like that. A lot of that comes from him. So I think no matter what, it all traces back to this film. All of the phallic imagery comes from his original ideas and designs. Have you guys ever seen the original like concept art for the alien?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Well, if you look at it, originally it was even more phallic in a lot of ways. Like its tongue looked exactly like a penis, in early concept art and stuff like that. And and the head literally was like a giant penis, and it's kind of been like toned down and a little bit. It made a little bit more subtle since those original like concept art designs. But a lot of it does come from H.R. Geiger. He's a weird dude, but his art is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he also did Poltergeist 2, which has a lot of that symbolism going on, and he also did Species, I think.
Yeah, I think he did.
Okay. I want to rewatch Species, damn it.
It keeps coming up in every review you do for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when we do Never Have Sex Again month.
I want to follow up on what you said there, Roscoe, because I think that's part of why I think it works best here. I think it's more pure here than it is anywhere else, because I love Aliens. I think Aliens is a really good movie, but Aliens has kind of a bit of an agenda in that way. Aliens is making very clearly a statement about sexuality and about feminism and about that kind of identity, and Alien isn't. Alien is just giving you a presentation of it. And I think that's why it works best here, because this movie's tackling those ideas on every level, and then the individual films that come afterwards just kind of latch onto one and go in detail there. I think it works best here because like I said before, it's creating that space. It's not about you being forced to sympathize with a person and then viewing the argument from their eyes. It's about you being an alien to this world and then bringing in your own senses of comfort into those ideas.
Okay. For me, I feel like it's all there, but it's not really delved into. I feel like it's kind of just on the surface, and I don't feel like the rest of the story really gets into it as much as Aliens does. Because Aliens, like, it does everything to do this, woman, man's world kind of thing. It gives it gives Ripley a surrogate child. She fights off against the Queen, the mother, and like there's just all these like things compounding upon each other that I feel make the sequel significantly more about the sexual imagery and the feminist angle than the original does.
I think it kind of sticks out in this movie in a way that it doesn't necessarily in Aliens and the sequels after that, because a lot of it is when you're watching it initially, you do kind of have those ideas of this is kind of like a rape allegory in certain ways, but then there are things that unless you watch the movie a couple times, you might not necessarily pick up that really make it stand out and really horrify you. Like the woman character, oh God, I can't remember her name, but the other woman character with the shorter hair. She, in her scene where she is killed by the alien, if you go back and watch that, when you see her, you don't get to see her body, but you get to see her legs. And if you notice, she's not wearing pants in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Her pants are gone. And it's little things like that you might not get that on the first viewing, but once you start to pick up on those little tiny, like, I guess, hints as to some of the bigger ideas the film's getting at, it really stands out, to me at least.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting how much of that is in the set design stuff, because H.R. Geiger also did a prototype Batmobile for Batman Forever. And I'm not sure if you guys have seen this thing. Have you?
I have not seen that, but that sounds crazy.
I must see this.
Okay. Well, the Batmobile is really interesting because it's in a weird tentacle X design. I sent you guys a picture of it over the chat.
That's so weird.
It looks like fallopian tubes.
Yeah, it looks pretty ugly. But you clearly see like the alien influence of it all. I mean, this is definitely a guy that never got his head out of that space.
Yeah. And
so basically, H.R. Geiger has just made a career out of being a pervert.
Kind of. Ridley Scott went to him for the design of the alien because he was like, I want this to look like that. And Ridley and if you go to H.R. Geiger's work even before Alien, it looks like Alien. That's the thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think part of why the sexual stuff just works better here is that it's channeled a little bit better. Like, it's really explicit, but so much of it is in the set design, so much of it is in the little details that you notice on every subsequent viewing.
They're not talking about it, really.
Exactly.
None of the characters are talking about that.
Exactly. That's part of my thing against Aliens is just that that's got an argument. That movie is making a one very particular case. And it makes a great case. It's just a matter of, like, it's not the same kind of pure objectivity that's in this.
Okay, so, like, I guess I agree with that. Like, a lot of the sexual stuff in this is very subtextual. Like, I mean, in the most overt way possible. There's a giant black penis running around a spaceship.
Right, exactly.
Like, so it's subtextual in a very overt way, whereas Aliens, I feel, kind of just says, no, fuck subtext, people don't get it. And like, shoves it in your face.
Which is kind of the James Cameron school of thought.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, shoving it in your face is a very rapey thing to do. Rapey is a good verb. You don't get to use the word rapey enough in casual conversation.
I wonder if there's a reason for that.
Maybe, probably. It's probably a good reason. Anyway. No, like, certainly, and I can see arguments here, but I still will always like the second film more, but it doesn't really matter because I'm not particularly fond of either. So, I don't know, like, the sexual imagery is something I find interesting about Aliens, and Alien, the franchise, and Aliens, and Alien, the movie, and whatever. The Xenomorphs, there we go.
The Xenomorph saga.
Yeah, there we go. And it's weird because, alright, no, this is tangential, but I feel like I said, these two franchises are so interconnected, I don't think it's really right to talk about one without the other at this point. So I mentioned this when we were doing the Concrete Jungle review, but that first part of the video got lost and yada yada yada. So anyway, like, it's weird that Alien as a franchise is so overt with its sexual imagery and it's very important to the story and everything, and yet Predator isn't.
Yeah.
he just has a vagina face, and it's never really adding anything except that it's really, really creepy looking. And I never quite understood that. It always seemed like a big missed opportunity not to go someplace with that.
I'm sure maybe some of the Alien Predator comics potentially go there, because the movies just weren't the place for that crossover, and it didn't really work in either case.
And it's so weird because it could have.
Yeah, it could have been amazing, and it wasn't.
No, and so I never understood why Predator never really went anywhere with that. Because, I mean, like, I guess my argument is, like, you know, I'm sure in the comics we've seen female Predators and everything.
Yeah, but it's
really
I guess my argument... It's very weird.
Yeah, I guess my argument for Predator as a franchise to really just kind of retroactively capitalize on that is, if you look in nature, most of the big animals of a species and most of the hunting animals of a species are the females anyway. So don't we just go back and retroactively say that the predators we've seen in all the movies are actually the females of the species? Because that could be, like, that pissed probably a lot of people off, but I think it could be really interesting since Predator is such a macho series. So much of it's about testosterone. So if you make it about, you know, like, man against woman kind of thing, do the opposite of what Alien is, that could actually be really fast.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the kind of channel where I can make a joke like this.
Go for it.
I was just gonna say, I bet the Predator is very good at giving blowjobs. I bet they feel wonderful.
No, I'd actually say he's probably really bad at it.
With the vagina mouth.
Yeah, but there are these big spiky teeth on it, and I would be frightened. It's like that episode of South Park, where they go to the Catholic Church and there's the alien species. Like, the whatever our species is, vagina has over 6,000 teeth. Do you really expect this? And that was the argument for why pedophilia was okay.
Wow.
South Park's a great series. Anyway. No, I always thought it was weird that Predator was so overtly a reaction to that, yet they don't do anything with it. And so I wanted to bring that up here, because I don't think I'm ever going to get the chance to say it again.
Yeah, I mean, a big thing that kind of separates Alien and Predator is that Alien, and like even Ridley Scott will tell you this, you know, Alien is a B-movie premise that they decided to do like an art house picture. Predator is an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. and that's the big difference between the two of them, and why Predator just kind of does not care about being politically correct or about subtext or any of that. And that's not anything against the movie. I love Predator, but I think that's the big difference between the two, and that's almost kind of why they go together so well. In a way, is that they're so drastically different.
Tracked.
Yeah.
All right, let me throw this out there because I think I've finally reached my ultimate conclusion about this. Okay. So this requires an anecdote. You guys ever seen Live Free or Die Hard?
Yes.
Okay, not a particularly good movie, but whatever. So my brother and I went to go see that one summer, and we saw it in the theater. And, like, you know, you got that theater high before you really think about a movie, but you did enjoy it the first time watching.
Yeah.
And so we walked out of that, and we'd really enjoyed it. And then we decided to sneak into The Bourne Supremacy, and we fell asleep in the theater. And it's not anything against The Bourne Supremacy, though that movie certainly has its own problems. It's just that you can't walk out of, like, something like Live Free or Die Hard, where the man literally drives a truck up an interstate ramp while getting shot at by a jet and then crashes the truck into the jet and, like, escapes an explosion by sliding in between two pieces of concrete road that have landed on top of each other, and then he gets out of it all and goes, woo! You can't walk out of something that objectively awesome and then into something as subtle and as driving and suspenseful as Bourne Supremacy and expect to enjoy it, because it's not the same kind of thing, and your adrenaline's already pumping from the other thing. Right. I think that's the problem I've had with Alien and Predators. I got exposed to Predator first and Alien through that, and so they've never been quite as enjoyable for me.
That's weird. That's the exact same thing with me, really. My dad showed me Predator before I ever saw Alien, and I had that for a while where it was like, I really prefer Predator. And looking back, that was just because I was afraid of Alien. I think that's a big thing. That's a big part of it, is what age you watch Alien at.
I was like at least 16 or 17.
And yeah, how old were you when you watched it for the first time, Steve?
Like 15, I think.
I'm trying to think exactly how old I was. I was probably like maybe in the 3rd grade. I'm not exactly sure, but it scared me bad.
I had the same thing with Halloween.
Yeah, I guess I just had good parents. I don't think I have a movie like that where I saw it when I was too young that it legitimately scared the shit out of me.
Well, I mean, I've never had any filtering of any kind. If I asked my dad, can I watch this rated R movie, he would be like, okay, and we'd watch it together. That's how I watched The Omen, that's how I watched Halloween, that's how I watched that Jackie Chan.
Yeah, I know, I figured. I just had to make that joke.
Yeah.
But no, I see what you guys are saying. I had the opposite, though. I think that's why I don't like Predator. Like, Predator is an okay movie. Predators is an okay movie. But I don't like them anywhere near as much as I like Alien or Aliens. And to an extent, I like Alien Resurrection, not because it's a good movie. It's really bad. But it's interesting to see what happens when someone thinks they know better than Joss Whedon and they don't.
Fair
I think
enough.
that's a movie that's like trying to make it seem like Joss Whedon had a lot more to do with it. Like, that movie looks like it's trying to be Firefly.
It was supposed to be so much different is the thing. Like, his whole thing is that he didn't want to write the movie because he thought there was no reason to bring Ripley back. It'd be ridiculous. And so he spent like months writing a script where, okay, if we brought her back, here's the psychological issues we had to dive into. And the studio's like, nah, that's too boring. So that whole movie got rewritten over and over again to the point where he didn't even want his name on the movie, but it still happened.
And that's almost the exact same thing that happened to Alien 3. From what I understand, this franchise derailed quickly.
Alien 3 sounds like it was probably hell. Like, that literally sounds like the most, like, I guess, hard to deal with film creating experience ever for David Fincher. Sounds horrible.
Yeah, like, from what I understand, that like, they have names for these things. They called the scripts Freddy Krueger's because they're the bastard child of 1,000 madmen. Like, that happened with the Flintstones movie as well, where just so many people came in and wrote the script for the movie and rewrote it and touched it up and so by the time they actually had the finished script that they decided to shoot with, it was just everywhere. Like, everyone had put their hands on it, and so it was like no real passion or genuine personal insight in the thing. It's just this amalgam of, like, maybe the kind of good parts from everybody's script, or at least the parts the studio felt was good.
Yeah, like, the thing with Alien 3, they had so many scripts written for that they started building sets before they had a script. And so David Fincher had to come in and rewrite the script while filming the movie, and he had to work into the script the sets that they had already built. Yeah.
And that is a really hard thing to do. But I still think Alien 3 probably has the best ending of the franchise. Like, I love when Ripley jumps into the lava. That was great.
Yeah, have you seen the assembly cut of the, not the theatrical, but the assembly cut of that movie?
No.
Yes.
Watch that. It is, I'm not going to say that it's great, but it's so much better. It's so much better. It's kind of like the difference between the Daredevil director's cut and the theatrical cut, at least in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of differences there. I still think Alien 3 is the worst in the franchise.
No, I'm gonna still have to go with 4.
Yeah, I still have to go with 4, but I'd rather watch 4 than 3, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's exactly why I say 3 is the worst. But the assembly cut is still kind of marginally entertaining in places.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else we wanted to say about Alien?
I just have one more point I just want to make about kind of something that you don't see too much in movies nowadays that is in Alien, and that's this has kind of become less and less popular, but having a movie that takes place in like one location throughout like the entire movie adds a lot to the movie if it's like a horror movie, because it makes that location become a character in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The Nostromo in itself, you're there and you really get a feel of what the ship looks like, how it works on like a functional level. And the fact, the movie's you get introduced into the movie with just shots of the empty Nostromo, nothing happening. You're just seeing this place that people obviously have lived in, but you don't see the people yet. You just see the ship. And it makes the ship a character. And it really comes through when you have Mother talking to the characters. It even further kind of brings out that idea of the location the movie is filmed in is as much of a character as the characters themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of got that film noir quality of the place that you're in, the city that you're in, or the atmosphere itself becomes vitally important to everything that's going on.
Yeah.
It's exactly like Chinatown, where Chinatown by the end of the film is its own character.
Like Gotham.
Yeah.
Like Gotham.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I'm trying to think of something else that did that well. Alfred Hitchcock did that a lot. He's got a couple movies that they seem like they could just as easily be plays. Like my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie is the one that no one remembers. It's Rope.
Never seen that one.
Oh, it's my favorite. It is legitimately a play. It's crazy how much of a play that is. It literally all takes place in one room. There isn't even a single scene outside of this one room.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's basically just an apartment, and like it's really cool because in the third act, as everything starts to go wrong, it's like starting to get nighttime outside of the apartment, and to do like mood lighting and stuff, they have a neon sign that's like on a building next door kick on, and like it's kind of this green and red flashing light keeps falling into the apartment, and so it adds to all the tension and stuff.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, I remember reading a book of contemporary reviews for Alien. And a lot of them made reference to Alfred Hitchcock. So maybe part of the reason you're getting that sensation is because it might have been intentional.
Maybe. And certainly there's, like I say, I feel like I'm harsher on this movie than it deserves because, I mean, someone has to be eventually. Everyone's just going to say good things about Alien.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you were, because this would have been a much less interesting... this would be much less interesting without that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I always think those are our best episodes when at least one person really, really doesn't like it. Whenever we're talking about a review or someone has like a really like contrary to opinion to everyone else, and the best are when everyone has a completely different opinion.
Yeah.
And so with this, like, objectively it's fine. Objectively it's a great movie and everything, and I'm not going to deny that. I just have it is not my thing by any stretch of the imagination. And the problems I have with it, I don't want to say they're nitpicky, but they're not like film ruining problems. They're just like, this is really dated.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think part of it is also maybe potentially if you haven't watched a lot of 70s movies, then you might just not be used to the way those were made and the kind of mindset you put yourself in watching that stuff. Yeah. I know I made you watch Chinatown once, and you saw this and Star Trek, but do you watch a lot of 70s movies or no?
It depends on who it is, Like, I don't go back to watch films from that era specifically because they're from that era.
Oh, okay, just out of curiosity. Because Alien is really... it's really the perfect statement to end that decade on, because it does everything those films, every one of my favorite 70s films does, except it's in space.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think I might have kind of like a Quentin Tarantino thing. Or you remember a couple months back we were talking about, I don't remember what it was, but you said, I don't really like Silver Age comics, and I entered in to put in kind of a joke, but also like a really good point, yet you love Grant Morrison.
Yes.
Like, I kind of have that with 70s films. Like, I don't really love 70s films, but I love Quentin Tarantino, and that's his bread and butter.
Yeah.
So, like, I really feel like I got the same kind of thing with that. So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this movie. It's good, though. Like, if the things I'm saying don't bother you about movies, then this is certainly the movie for you to watch. I don't know why you waited all the way till the end of this review to go watch Alien for the first time, apparently, though, so... Random single person from, I'm going to just get as specific as possible, from Newfoundland, Australia, if that's a place that exists, that is now wearing their pajamas and eating Lucky Charms. There you go. Now you can go watch Alien for the first time. And if you're actually a person that is perfectly described by that sum up, then please leave a comment, because I don't know. I need to know I have these powers. Let's go ahead and do a rating then, if we're all done. Squatch, the way we do ratings is it's on a 5 scale, and you have to pick a noun or specific thing from the movie. So we'll let you go last, and I'll have Steve go first.
Okay. I'll give this 5 out of 5 chest-ripping penises.
I will go ahead and give this. You're gonna hate me. I'm gonna give it 2.5 out of 5 Ripley underwear scenes.
I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5 face raping spider crabs.
Yeah, that's my favorite summation of Alien. Was from Cracked After Hours. It rapes its way into you, then it rapes its way out of you, and then it goes and rapes your friends. And that's really the best way to describe it. So, everyone, thank you very much for listening. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
I'm the politician.
And I'm the Squatch.
There we go. It's the Sasquatch. And until next time, we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Ha 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 ha!